For over 3 decades, Soul Train wasn't just a TV show, it was a cultural revolution. Before Soul Train became a cultural force, it was just an idea, a radical one at that. In the early 1970s, American television wasn't built for diversity. If you were a black artist, getting airtime was a struggle. If you were a black teenager, seeing someone who looked like you dancing on TV was almost unheard of. The mainstream spotlight shone almost exclusively on white performers. Shows like American Bandstand dominated the airwaves, offering sanitized versions of pop culture with very little space for soul, funk, or emerging black genres. That's when Don Cornelius decided to change the game. Don Cornelius wasn't a media mogul. He didn't have millions in funding or executives backing him. He was a former Chicago police officer and local news reporter who'd grown frustrated with the limitations he saw in media. He believed black music deserved a bigger stage, and more importantly, it deserved ownership, with a deep baritone voice and an even deeper belief in cultural representation. Cornelius scraped together whatever resources he could find and launched Soul Train in 1970 as a local show on WCIU TV. The format was simple but electric. A live audience of stylish young black dancers grooved to the hottest tracks of the day while musical acts performed in between. The show's production values were bare bones, but the energy was undeniable. It was vibrant, real, and unlike anything else on TV at the time. The first guests, none other than Gladys Knight and the Pips. It was a declaration. This show wasn't just going to feature black music, it was going to celebrate it unapologetically. Within a year, the buzz grew too loud to ignore. Soul Train went national in 1971, becoming the first black-owned, nationally syndicated music television program in American history. That was huge. At a time when most black entertainers were still struggling to break into the mainstream, Soul Train gave them a platform that was both accessible and powerful. Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, the Jackson 5, Aretha Franklin, they all found a home on that iconic stage. But Soul Train wasn't just about the music, it was also about the movement. The show quickly evolved into a showcase of black culture in all its dimensions: style, dance, attitude, and expression. The dancers weren't professionals, at least not at first. They were local teens and 20-somethings, often from tough neighborhoods, bringing the hottest moves from the streets onto a national platform. For many, being on Soul Train was a dream, and for a few, it was a launchpad to fame. Notable alumni include Jody Watley, Rosie Perez, and Jeffrey Daniel, who later taught Michael Jackson the moonwalk. What made Soul Train revolutionary wasn't just that it existed, it was that it thrived on authenticity. Don Cornelius made sure the show never pandered to white audiences. He didn't tone things down or clean things up. He showcased black excellence in its raw, rhythmic, and revolutionary form. And viewers responded. Ratings soared, especially in urban markets, and advertisers began to take notice of the power behind this new cultural wave. Cornelius's signature sign-off, "Love, Peace, and Soul," wasn't just a catchphrase, it became a mantra for generations. It symbolized hope, unity, and pride during an era marked by civil rights struggles, systemic oppression, and deep-rooted racism. In a landscape dominated by white narratives, Soul Train was a rare space where black joy took center stage. And it wasn't just black audiences who tuned in. Over time, the show developed a multicultural fan base. Everyone wanted to learn the Soul Train line. Everyone wanted to dress like the dancers. The show shaped fashion trends just as much as musical ones. Bell-bottoms, afros, platform shoes. If you saw it on Soul Train, you'd see it on the streets next. But even as the train picked up speed, early signs of friction were quietly forming behind the scenes. Cornelius was a perfectionist. He had a very specific vision for the show and guarded it fiercely. There were rumors that he sometimes clashed with staff, artists, and even dancers. But at this stage, those tensions were minor, overshadowed by the show's growing influence. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Soul Train had become an institution. It wasn't just another program, it was the place to be. New music genres, like disco and funk, flourished on the show. It had outlasted most of its imitators. Even American Bandstand began to feel stale by comparison. And while the show was still relatively low budget, its cultural currency was unmatched. Soul Train also started expanding its brand. The Soul Train Music Awards launched in 1987 and gave the show even more legitimacy. Now, instead of just introducing acts. It was honoring legends and shaping the industry. It seemed unstoppable, but time doesn't stop for anyone, not even Don Cornelius. And as the 80s gave way to the 90s and the music world shifted again, the very thing that made Soul Train iconic, its connection to the culture, would become its greatest vulnerability. The train had taken off from the station with undeniable momentum. But what happens when the conductor won't change tracks? Soul Train wasn't just a television show, it was a cultural phenomenon. It offered a vibrant, upbeat window into black music and dance, a weekly celebration of soul, funk, and R&B that energized living rooms across America. But behind the glitz and glitter of the dazzling set, the colorful dance lines, and the infectious beats, the reality was far more complex and far less smooth. The cracks behind the curtain started to appear much earlier than many fans realized. Don Cornelius was the visionary who created and nurtured Soul Train from its inception in 1971. He wasn't just the host, he was the heartbeat, the personality, and the guiding force behind the show. Cornelius had a clear, specific vision. Soul Train was a family-friendly, positive space that showcased black culture in a way that was polished, uplifting, and above all, controlled. That control, however, would later become both a strength and a significant source of tension. Cornelius was famously a control freak, not in a small way, but in a deeply involved, hands-on manner that left little room for improvisation. Every detail on Soul Train was carefully orchestrated, from the costumes and choreography to the music selection and even the performers' behavior. The dancers on Soul Train, the Soul Train gang, were expected to adhere to strict rules. They had to maintain perfect energy, wear appropriate clothing, and above all, embody the wholesome, family-friendly image Cornelius demanded. Spontaneity was carefully limited. The dance lines were rehearsed and synchronized, designed to look effortless but tightly controlled behind the scenes. Performers were required to lip-sync, not sing live. This choice, often common for television variety shows at the time, ensured a consistent, high-quality audio experience. But it also meant that Soul Train sacrificed some of the raw, unpredictable energy that live performances bring. If a performer deviated from the plan or made a mistake, the producers swiftly shut it down or edited it out. The polished image was paramount, and anything that threatened to break the illusion was viewed as a risk. As the 1980s gave way to the 1990s, the musical landscape was shifting rapidly. Hip-hop was exploding from its roots in urban neighborhoods to become a dominant force in popular culture. But Don Cornelius was openly skeptical, some would say dismissive of this new genre. He publicly criticized rap music, describing it as too aggressive and gritty, not aligned with the positive, soulful vibe Soul Train had cultivated. This created a palpable divide. The show had been a platform for funk, disco, R&B, and soul, genres that, while evolving, still held onto a certain smoothness and mainstream appeal. Pop, with its raw storytelling and rebellious spirit, didn't fit neatly into Cornelius's vision. This disapproval wasn't just a private opinion. It shaped the show's bookings and its attitude towards the hip-hop movement. Rappers and hip-hop artists found fewer opportunities to perform on Soul Train compared to other genres. The show's reluctance to embrace the new wave of black music created an invisible barrier, sending a message that the era of Soul Train as the definitive voice of black music was slipping. Tensions grew. Dancers and musicians who felt the pulse of the streets, the energy of the new generation, began to voice their frustrations. Some performers wanted more freedom to express themselves authentically, without having to fit into the family-friendly mold that felt increasingly out of touch. Others felt sidelined as the show tried to hold on to a fading era of soul and disco. Cornelius himself started to withdraw from the spotlight, where he once appeared frequently as the warm, charismatic host. By the late 1980s and into the 90s, his presence on screen became more sporadic. Behind the scenes, those who worked closely with him noted a shift in his demeanor, a man struggling to reconcile his legacy with a rapidly changing culture. All these elements converged to create a fragile atmosphere. The show that had once been a beacon of black culture was now caught between honoring its roots and adapting to an unstoppable wave of change. The polished, perfectly choreographed image couldn't mask the internal struggles brewing beneath the surface. The cracks behind the curtain were widening. Soul Train was no longer just a joyous celebration of music and dance. It was becoming a battleground for competing visions of black culture, caught in the crossfire between tradition and transformation. This tension would only intensify as the years went on, setting the stage for the dramatic unraveling that many fans never saw coming. By the early 2000s, Soul Train was struggling. The once electric stage now felt out of touch. Younger viewers were glued to MTV and BET. Ratings slipped, the music changed, but the format didn't. People weren't tuning in like they used to, and the show knew it. Cornelius tried to pivot, bringing in guest hosts, younger acts, even changing production styles, but nothing stuck. Soul Train was no longer setting trends. It was trying to catch up, and that's when things really went off the rails. It happened during a taping in 2006, one of the last episodes ever recorded. A performance by an up-and-coming artist went completely off script. Depending on who you ask, it was either an intentional protest or an unexpected meltdown. One dancer claimed a live mic picked up an expletive-laced rant about how the show was exploiting the culture. Another insider hinted that a wardrobe malfunction was edited out too late, leaving producers scrambling. Whatever it was, it shocked everyone. The footage only aired once in a limited region before being mysteriously pulled. Some say it was edited, out for reruns. Others say it was quietly buried by producers trying to avoid a scandal, but it was too late. The damage was done. Almost immediately after the scene aired, the fallout was brutal. Major sponsors backed out. Longtime producers resigned. Don Cornelius, who had already stepped away from hosting duties, went silent. Internal sources said he was furious, embarrassed, and hurt. Behind closed doors, there was talk of canceling the rest of the season. Instead, they aired reruns and quietly pulled the plug. No finale, no announcement, just silence. After over 100 episodes, Soul Train vanished. Cornelius may have been the face of Soul Train, but his story after the show took a dark turn. He retreated from the spotlight, struggled with health issues, faced legal problems, and in 2012 he took his own life. A tragic end for a man who once preached love, peace, and soul to the world. Friends said he never got over how Soul Train ended. That infamous scene, whether real or myth, haunted him. He felt betrayed by the network, the culture, and maybe even himself. And just like that, the legacy he built was suddenly surrounded by silence and speculation. What actually happened during that scene? Was it as bad as people say? Did it even really air? Some say the whole thing is exaggerated, that the final episode was simply a victim of low ratings. Others insist the footage exists but was locked away, never to be seen again. What we do know is this: after that moment, Soul Train was never the same. The energy was gone, the magic had faded, and what was once the heartbeat of black music television now lived only in memory. Today, Soul Train is a nostalgic icon. Clips still go viral, the dance line is immortal, and every year the Soul Train Awards try to keep the spirit alive. But most people don't know how it really ended. A moment of controversy, a shift in culture, a slow unraveling that exploded. In a single scene, Soul Train was more than a show, it was a movement. But even movements can derail when the world changes faster than they do. The truth is, no one moment kills a show. It's always a buildup, a tension that finally snaps. But in the case of Soul Train, that snap happened on camera, and even if we never see the footage, its impact is still felt today. It's a reminder that behind every iconic show, there are stories we were never meant to see. And sometimes, the most unforgettable moment is the one they tried hardest to make us forget.